Bye-bye, Miss American Pie. Drove my Chevy to the levee, but the levee was dry.
Today, America sits uneasily with herself.
Whiskey and rye, singing this'll be the day that I die.
The dream is misting over as America loses her primacy in the world marketplace, and the old enemy is still there, still Japan.
Bye-bye, Miss American Pie. Drove my Chevy to the levee, but the levee...
Japan bashing, even for congressmen, is the favorite new martial art.
Singing, this'll be the day that I die. This'll be the day that I...
Last January, the president himself added to the national embarrassment with a disastrous visit to Japan. The trip had an air of desperation, as the most powerful man in the world half bullied, half cajoled the successful Japanese. The irony is that the staggering success of the Japanese was built on the principles of an American, a management intellectual largely ignored in his own country.
Early in the 80s, I arbitrarily picked up Dr. Deming's theme that whenever you're having a problem, 80-85% of the time, it is not people. It's the process, it's the equipment that's being used, it's the design itself. It's something people can't do a thing about.
I believe that Dr. Deming has started a quality revolution. What he taught the Japanese can be done by any manager around the world who wants to make the effort. And that his revolution is as important, if not even more important, and certainly as drastic as the Industrial Revolution or even the Agricultural Revolution.
And he put into perspectives the troubles I'd had at the Xerox Corporation, which by that time was going down the tubes. They were in real bad trouble. I went to the Sloan Library and took books off the shelf to see what were they teaching in the business schools. And it came as a shock that what Deming was saying was 180 degrees different than what they were saying. It was different.
After the war, for a decade, figures showed that we were doing well. We were not. We were doing miserably. And it caught up with us. The style of management caught up. We can't get by with it.
Dr. W. Edwards Deming, 91 years of age, has long believed the American dream was a mirage. As the man the Americans sent to reconstruct the Japanese economy after the war, he is the original management guru. His seminars are quasi-religious. He still holds young American managers in thrall throughout 4 days of the Deming gospel.
The responsibility for quality lies at the top.
Yet despite his seminal influence on Japan, and latterly on America and Europe, it still rankles that his own countrymen have never really understood.
People are doing their best. That's our downfall. Doing their best without knowledge. Putting in hard work without knowledge. There's no substitute for knowledge.
A prophet is not without honor save in his own country and in his own house. That was the biblical fate of Dr. W. Edwards Deming until a few years ago. Now the Testament sells in thousands. His supporters call themselves Deming disciples, and most months 500 of them pay $2,000 each to hear the word.
All right.
Thank you very much.
It's typical of this highly paid international consultant that he should choose to live austerely in a quiet Washington suburb. His basement office, the way Hollywood designers would have drawn it in the 1930s, is presided over by his secretary of nearly 40 years, Cecilia Killian.
people that want to see you.
Oh, yes.
Admiral Kirkpatrick on 15 February. What he is trying to do is to have President Bush mention you in the State of the Union message at the end of January.
President Bush wouldn't be the first. The study is cluttered with accolades from presidents of countries and companies around the world. Deming is a statistician by training. He graduated in mathematics from Wyoming University and Yale and spent his early working life counting the American population for the U.S. Census Bureau. Facing this laborious task, Deming set about applying his statistical methods to speed things up. He believes his procedures saved the Bureau several $100,000. When America joined the Second World War, Deming's skills were used to train the managers who had to run the production lines for the war effort. Deming's work methods were based on a rigorous application of statistics. Eliminate waste was a key message. He created a dramatic reduction in scrapping and reworking of scarce raw materials. Deming's interest in adopting these methods had been influenced by another American statistician. In 1931, Dr. Shewhart wrote a key text, which laid down the principles of statistical process control. What could be measured must be measured exactly. Control charts could show what was in statistical control and what was not. The war, conventional and nuclear, destroyed Japanese industry. When the country's young managers approached the task of renewal, they wanted new styles of management. World War II was a triumph of industrial management and production. The grim evidence of the American superiority in those skills lay all around the Japanese. The Americans sent consultants to advise on better management methods. Among them were Homer Sarason from Western Electric, Dr. Joseph Duran, another management consultant who was steeped in the methods of statistical control. Then in 1950, Dr. Deming arrived to tower over the Japanese both literally and metaphorically.
They were sorely afraid that they had established a reputation for shoddy quality, cheap and worth the price, that they could never undo it. I assured them that it would take only a short while to undo that reputation, develop new reputation. And remember this, when I talked with top management in Japan, I was talking to 80% of the capital. I was back again in 6 months, back again in another 6 months, back in 1952, several trips, always teaching the same thing. They listened. I said that in 5 years, the whole world would know about Japanese quality, that manufacturers the world over would be screaming for protection. They beat it. They did it in 4 years.
Despite the dry statistics, Deming's theories are very sensitive to people. His fishtail diagram illustrates how any system is the sum of its human parts. People in a system must cooperate, the one with the other.
The system must have an aim. Everybody must know about it. Know what his job is. Who depends on him? Whom does he depend on? Then there's joy in work.
Because you feel you belong, you're important, you're really part of the company.
You know when you've done a good job and have a chance to do it. That's all people ask for.
ただ私がデミングさんの話にプラスしたのはね、これはやっぱりね、人間の本質が影響してる。どんなにレクチャーしたって、どんなに指導をうまくしたって、どんなに本を読ましたってダメだ。だから人間の品質管理をすべきであるというのは僕の考えなんですよ。人間の品質管理をやるべきである。で、私はこれを始めたわけです。人間を含めての品質管理っていうのをそれからずっとやりましてね。
Deming was so highly thought of in Japan that they named an award after him and his teachings. Japanese companies strive for quality and continuous improvement, and one of the highest honors they can receive is the Deming Prize.
一般に管理というのはこの図が示すような手順、つまり計画、実施、チェック、アクションを繰り返して行うことにより、より高度の管理水準へと発展していくことができるのです。この管理のサークルを私たちが製品を作るときに適用したものが皆さんご存知のデミングサークルと呼ばれるものです。
There's a tiger on the market and I got the very first in town. She got a hearse floor shifter and the wildest moving mill around. I need a 389 all super tuned to really shut 'em down. Oh yeah, now go girl, drag strip.
But happy times were here again with the end of the war. Who needed something as dusty as statistical quality control? America didn't. Other economies had been eclipsed by the war effort. American industry stood tall, the world's provider. And even if the quality of American goods was only adequate, even questionable, there was nowhere else to go. The dictums of Deming were forgotten.
All new. All systems are
Dr. Deming, revered in Japan, returned to Washington and a quiet suburban life. But Deming had identified a fallacy in American industry. Its success was due to the aftermath of the war, not to its own management skills. The accountants thought the figures added up, but Deming knew that the most important quotients cannot actually be measured.
Beware of figures. You better know how to use them. Be guided by theory. For example, you do some training, spend £20,000 for training. Well, I mean training for a skill. You know, the cost shows on the ledger. No doubt about it, there's the amount. The benefit, you'll never know. You cannot measure it.
It was American television that suddenly woke up to the 80-year-old prophet in their midst. It was to be the second Deming revolution.
You don't get ahead by making product and then separating the good from the bad, because it's wasteful. It wastes time of men who are paid wages. It wastes time of machines, if there are machines. It wastes material.
What we need is to have Dr. Deming.
The 90-minute program asked the critical question, why was America losing out to Japan? Dr. Deming appeared for just 9 minutes at the end.
And they did it, and they've done it well. Now
the next day, Deming's phone never stopped ringing. At last, the local prophet was being heard.
And I couldn't quite believe that there was this 80-year-old man who was living 5 miles from the White House that no one in America had heard of. I even went to the White House and talked to Charles Schultz, who was then chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, and I said, do you know W. Edwards Deming? And he said, is he Joe Deming's son? And I said, not unless Joe Deming is 110 years old. And he'd never heard of him.
The company presidents of America were queuing up to speak to him. One in particular made repeated calls on his time.
As I came to know Dr. Deming and we talked more frequently, I began to see how fundamentally important people are in his basic management principles. Time and time again, a key principle of his, you can see it starts with this respect for the human being that he inherently has. And that resonated so well with my own feelings that I quickly came to be very responsive to his ideas.
Ford's market share had slipped as a result of the Japanese competition. However much the Americans may have resented the imports, the fact was they were buying them. Peterson agreed with Deming that the poor quality of American cars was to blame.
The approach in America at that stage, and I must say also in Europe, was that if you were within the engineer's limits, plus or minus so many thousandths of an inch or whatever it is, millimeters, then that's good enough. quote, good enough, you know. The Japanese theory, which was demonstrated by this so vividly, picked up from Dr. Deming, was that you should be striving for continuous improvement.
In 1981, Ford, in partnership with Mazda, was building its first front-wheel drive car for America. The transmissions were being made partly in America, partly in Japan. Ford's engineers couldn't understand why the American transmissions were noisier and stiffer than the Japanese ones, until they pulled apart some samples.
When we tore the two down, we found, first of all, that they obviously paid great attention even to the appearance of, or the elegance almost, to an engineer or a manufacturer. The gears just were beautifully made. And then as we dimensioned them, they were operating within a much, much narrower range of tolerance, way within the specifications compared with the American firm. And that control and continuous improvement toward so little variation was leading to that transmission functioning in a far superior way in the hands of the customer.
Ford's market share increased during the 1980s. In 1988, it overtook General Motors. America's top executives voted Peterson the country's most effective leader. Don Peterson says that Ford's success in the 80s was entirely due to the quality transformation prompted by Dr. Deming. Suddenly, everyone was talking quality. The bandwagon of total quality management was rolling fast. Every management guru had a scheme and an expensive book which, properly adhered to, would lead your company to the sunny uplands of quality and profit.
Anything you can say, I can say faster.
I can say anything faster than you.
Dr. Deming is the first person to tell you there is no quick fix. I think there is no instant pudding is the way he puts it. People want a recipe, and quality is a way of thinking. It's a drastic change in how we think about everything we do and even in how we live. And you can't do that overnight. And American managers are very reluctant to change because when you get in a tight fix, you always want to go back and do what worked in the past. Well, it won't work anymore because the Japanese and people who are following them are doing things better.
With Dr. Deming's belated recognition in his own country came a reverence that borders on the religious. The Deming disciples flocked to hear his slow, mocking drawl at 4-day seminars across America. Over the years, Deming has summarized his beliefs in 14 points. Moses only had 10. His fundamental belief in quality through continuous improvement stands alongside contentious ideas like the scrapping of performance-related pay.
I think the tragedy is people listen to him and then it seems so hard that they just take a little piece of it. American managers, for the most part, want a Chinese menu. They want to take some from A and some from B and some from C of the different quality philosophies or the quality experts, and it doesn't work that way.
In 1985, an American company based in Miami became the first outside Japan to win the Deming Prize. The Florida Power and Light Company reasoned that a drive to improve the quality of its service to customers would be good for business and good for its image. They worked hard for their Deming Prize. The decision was prompted by the news that a Japanese power company, Kansai Electric, had won the prize the year before.
The Deming Prize had never been offered outside of the country of Japan, so it took some doing with negotiating with the Japanese to get them to offer that opportunity to us. Once they had said that, yes, you will be eligible, you may apply, we think that you've made significant improvements in your organization and have demonstrated a real quality process application, we set about training the organization in a way that we have never trained before.
Every one of the company's 15,000 employees was involved at some stage of the quality improvement program. Listen to the man who actually does the job is an important Deming nostrum. Meter readers have a high accident rate. The men pointed out that many injuries came from dog bites. The meter readers suggested the solution. A portable computer now tells them which houses to beware of. To win the Deming Prize, you need continuous improvement, and other ideas were forthcoming. They introduced binoculars for the more scary assignments. The meter men were at the sharp end, literally. Because they were consulted, accident rates fell.
If you do not seek continuous improvement in all that you do, you really have not implemented a true quality process. Quality improvement means there is continuous improvement. You have to do continuous organizational self-assessment.
A good example of this is the campaign to reduce power cuts. These are often caused by trees falling across the wires. Intensive tree pruning reduced the number of power cuts dramatically. But even more power cuts were avoided when foresters analysed the growth rate of different trees. By concentrating on the fastest growing trees, they've reduced power failures, using the same men and equipment. Despite winning the Deming Prize, Florida Power and Light doesn't follow all the doctor's orders. One aspect it has steadfastly ignored is Deming's opposition to performance-related pay, point 12 of the 14 points.
Yes, we are aware that that was one of Dr. Deming's cautions not to do. We have always believed that if you're going to be successful in keeping your employees informed, if you're going to be successful in giving them guidance and coaching on how to do better if they're having difficulty in performing, and certainly the most important part is if you're going to recognize your employee for doing a good job, we couldn't find a better way than having these performance appraisal sessions.
Ranking comes from failure to understand variation. To understand that of 2, 3, 10 people, 2, 3, or 10 divisions, one will be at the top and one will be at the bottom, no matter what. The question is, what do the differences mean? That requires knowledge. The differences may not mean anything.
One of Deming's theories is that you shouldn't really reward individual performance, you shouldn't pick people out, you should drive fear out of the sort of competitive workplace. Now at Ford, you did reward on an individual basis. Why?
Yes, originally because everybody else did it. It's just a built-in pattern throughout, let's call it the developed Western countries. But I do think his point is one that should be given a lot of thought, and there should be consideration toward moving to reward systems that emphasize the results of the team rather than the individual.
One more. Step right up here. Only one more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now what are we going to do with you?
At his seminars, Dr. Deming illustrates his ideas on management with an elaborate charade called the Red Bead Experiment.
Don't get close to willing workers.
Deming plays the crusty old manager of an imaginary factory.
Which one of you is average?
From the audience, he recruits 6 willing workers and 3 quality inspectors. He sets them to work.
The material comes in a vessel. Unfortunately, this incoming material has some red beads in it. Your job is to make white beads. Are you clear?
The joke is at the expense of management. Deming shows how willing workers can never make quality goods, in this case white beads, in a bad system. Quality inspectors make no difference. As long as there are red beads in the box, the workers will fail.
Return the beads, same motions. Now it takes the paddle in the beads, not on the beads.
The paddle is a wooden block with 50 holes drilled in it. The trick is to fill all the holes with white beads only.
Over to inspector number 1.
On his first day on the production line, Johnny's work is only contaminated with 5 red beads. He's easily beaten his co-workers. Now Deming shows how bad management can be fooled by figures.
Johnny, our best worker, gets a merit increase in pay. No question about it.
The absurd fallacy carries on to the second day of production.
Johnny, on the merit increase in pay, our best worker, no question about it. Carries the work to inspector number 1.
Nine. Dismissed.
Oh. Raise went to his head. Got careless.
This is what Deming means by understanding the causes of variation. Western management, he says, has failed to grasp cause and effect. The red bead experiment ridicules competition in the workplace. Incentive schemes like performance-related pay, fear schemes like short-term contracts are revealed as illogical, plain wrong. Deming believes we need not competition, but cooperation. Isn't it competition that made this country great?
No, it's cooperation. Competition is our ruination. We've been on the decline for decades. We're on the decline. The decline will continue till we learn. Whether we'll learn, I don't know.
We make it almost like a national religion for competitiveness, but that's not how we make our gains. That's not, when we go see what is actually happening, there's teamwork and cooperation. You know, we won the West. Well, all the farmers got together and helped each other to build their houses. Or the agricultural service was teaching, everybody was cooperating and teaching everyone, and so on. I think for every example you can give me of competitiveness, I'll show you a dozen examples of cooperation and how that really worked.
A short while ago, a room at the American Statistical Association in Washington was dedicated to Dr. W. Edwards Deming. It's a collection of his writings and souvenirs, but it is incomplete. At 91, he has survived both his wife and his eldest daughter. There is still a job to be done, still continuous improvement to be pursued.
He has a mission, but most importantly, I think that Dr. Deming is a living example of his own philosophy. He's continually trying to improve his philosophy of continual improvement. He is a lifelong learner. That's why his mind is still sharp. That's why he is still able to take this punishing schedule 6 days a week.
I think he's a patriot in the old-fashioned good sense of the word. He sees in democratic institutions and in the dreams of our founders over 200 years ago, that there was something very good and it ought not to disappear, and that we are destroying ourselves. And he doesn't want that to happen.
I did not export to Japan American methods or practice. I took to them something new. Americans have still not learned it, nor the Western world. Nothing can stop them. Not a thing. Some people have said you have to be in a crisis before you pay attention. The Japanese were in trouble. We're in worse trouble because we don't know it. The Japanese knew it. It was obvious.
Next week, can better managers be fashioned from a few days in the great outdoors?